Good day and welcome to A Place Called Through. We're broadcasting live from WYTV7 Community Broadcasters Network. You know, A Place Called Through where we share those inspirational moments about real people going through real life challenges. You know, we all go through different challenges of life. It's how we go through and when we come through that makes the difference. You know, and we can only do that through this mission of hope, which is only done through your charitable giving. So we ask today, if you have already given, we say thank you for sowing that seed into this ministry. And if you haven't, and you'd like to do so, and you'd like to continue hearing more inspirational stories here on A Place Called Through, where I am your host, Patricia Wade Goings, please visit our website at WYTV7.org. Today, we are delighted to have with us as our guest, Ms. Latonia Henry, and she's going to be sharing her story about domestic violence and sexual abuse. And we hope today that you'll be inspired, encouraged, and empowered by what you're going to hear. Welcome to A Place Called Through, Ms. Henry.
Thank you for the invitation.
We are truly delighted to have you as our guest here as we go on take this journey together for a few minutes today as we talk about domestic violence, the effects of it, and sexual abuse. You know, this is a national problem. It didn't just happen yesterday, and some people want to say because of the pandemic, because of COVID-19, but it has actually been in existence for a long, long time. Sometimes It goes unnoticed because people don't want to speak about it too freely or too often. But, you know, I want to share some facts with you. You know, you can also, if you're a victim of domestic violence, we want to do this right up front. Please get help. The National Domestic Violence Hotline number is 1-800-799-7233. But we also want to share with you this fact that on a typical day, this hotline and many other hotlines that service domestic violence have been reported that more than 20,000 phone calls are placed to the hotlines. So that tells us domestic violence has not just started, it's continuing, unfortunately, to today and maybe in the future. But we want you to know that help is there. But we want to begin with Ms. Henry. Tell us, Ms. Henry, a little bit about, you know, your story, early childhood. We know, you know, most kids, as we previously stated in other inspirational moments, children are always outside playing with their siblings, friends, family, school life. So talk to us about your family life a little bit as you were growing up.
My family life was a bit complicated because my grandparents raised me. My mother passed when I was 3, and my grandmother and step-grandfather took me to Estill, South Carolina from Savannah to raise me and my 3 older sisters. My sisters were way older than me, so as they graduated, they came back to Savannah. But my grandparents raised me from 3 until 14.
Well, we're sorry to hear about your mother's passing, you know, and as a child so early, you know, that's really hard for you to grasp because your mom and your dad are pretty much all that you know, who you find protection in. They're your security blankets. They're the love that you have. They're actually the only people that you really know that are so close knitted to you. And so having to have lost your mother at an early age, we're sure that that was really horrific for you. So what was the changes now that occurred for you because you now had to go live with your grandparents? Were you close to them prior to your mother's passing?
To be honest, at 3, I don't remember. I don't even remember my mother. I got a picture of her about 15 years ago, and that was the first time I actually seen her face. But I have no memories of my mother or the relationship or anything before. 5 years old is my early remembrance of myself.
And what about your father?
My father was a very complicated man. He has 30-something children. He was a truck driver, and he was a complicated man. He abused my mother when she was pregnant, and that's how my mother passed. She passed in labor from being beat in her stomach by my father. So I didn't learn that bit of information until I was about 9, 10 years old. because I thought my grandmother was my mother. So I called her mama. And the kids in school would say that that old lady is not your mama, that's your grandmama. So I went home crying one day, and she just told me that she was my grandmama and the story, because she felt I was old enough to understand. And I was really honestly broken and hurt, because once my grandmother took me to Estill, I only saw my father like twice. And both of those times were not pleasant times. So I really didn't have a relationship with him when I was young. All I knew was my grandmother and my step grandfather.
And so they pretty much kind of just took you and your siblings in,
Yes.
and they became the parents because of the fact that your mother had now passed. So what kind of effect has this now had on you, knowing the truth that your mother passed as because she was a victim of domestic violence?
Yes, I didn't understand it because I'm still 9, 10 years old. So I'm trying to comprehend why my father did what he did. Why did he not come see me? He didn't offer any kind of financial support. My grandmother took care of me off of her Social Security, and then she would clean houses. So that's how she took care of me, but he offered no support. So a lot of things started triggering in my mind about what type of person would just let their child just be where they're at and not have any concern about them.
And and that's startling too, because you even though he was the one that was causing the issues, and he was the one that was abusing your mother, you would think, okay, well, he would try to at least say something to you, and
Yes.
to your siblings. How did your siblings handle this?
Well, all of us had different fathers. My mother had 4 daughters, and two of my sisters were by different people. The sister that was 9 years older than me, we had the same father, but her relationship with him, she did not even acknowledge him as her father.
Because of the domestic violence against your mother?
Yes, because they were old enough to know the sister that was his was 9 years older than me. Then I had a sister that's 12 years older than me, and then the older one was 14 years older. So they were old enough to know what was going on in the home and understand domestic violence and what was happening with our mother.
And so are you close to your siblings today?
I was. 2 of them have passed on now. One of them still living. And before they passed, we got past some things, and we became close.
And that's good. So you were able to bring the closure, and I'm so sorry to hear about the loss of, your siblings as well. So you were able to caption in on what actually happened earlier in you all's lives with your mom and your dad. You were able to kind of bring, peace or closure, if you will, to that part of accepting that this is really what happened. And now that you're actually an adult and finding out, more and more, I'm sure, about that relationship with your mom and your dad.
Yes.
What was going to school like? I mean, because the kids do talking, as you said, kids start chit-chatting, and they'll tell you, no, that's not your mom, that's not your dad, that's your cousin, your sister, and all that kind of stuff. So what was going on in school?
School was horrible. I was very skinny. I had these very big, thick Coca-Cola glasses, and I was nerdish. So I got picked on a lot, and just school was horrible. And the town, everybody was related. So when you think about it, this is my family, my cousins, that are treating me the way they're treating me, because Estill was only so big as one stoplight. Once you get past that stoplight, you're heading to the next town. So it's like, it's family, but they're still kids. So they hear their parents talking in the household about what's going on, and they call my grandmama Miss Come See. So they heard their parents talking about what's going on in Miss Come See house, and they just spread it at school. So yeah, school was horrible. It was a horrible experience.
And that's saying, and you mentioned Estill. I had the privilege of visiting Estill yesterday, and you're right. You go to the stoplight, and that's it. It was like nothing else there.
Yes.
So in these small towns, people do establish, I guess, closer relationships with one another because the towns are so small. there's really not a lot of things, creative things or recreational things there as such. As I said, I visited Esto yesterday, and what I was looking for, we rode past about 3-4 times before we realized, oh, this is what we're looking for. You had to kind of like look up for the sign, and just luckily we looked up, and that's when we spotted it. So I can imagine it. As I looked at some of the houses that was on that main strip, everybody's house is kind of like sitting in the next person's house. So everybody kind of like knows everybody. They know your family history. So that was, I guess as children listening to the adults talking, these kids overheard some of these kind of conversations. What was church life there? Did you go to worship regularly? Were your parents in worship services?
My grandmother was avid to make sure that we were in church every time the church door opened. So yes, we were in church for choir practice, Bible study, any kind of activity that was going on, we were in church.
And so was the church, what kind of support had the church provided to you, to you and your siblings at this point? Because I'm sure most of the people in the church knew the story, they've heard the story, and they were gossiping about the stories. So what kind of support would you say that you got from the church?
We got no support from the church. And we're talking about the early 70s. So things were, excuse me, a little different as far as that old homage that what goes on in that house stays in that house. So even though it was a church environment, everybody kept to they mind their own business. My grandmother was a stickler for not talking about what went on inside that house. And we would actually get a beating if we said anything that was going on in there. So I learned to keep quiet. And the church really was just a place we went to worship. It wasn't any kind of support or anything like that.
And that's amazing because, a lot of times when people are hurting, they turn to the church for support. That's where they go so that someone can help them to get through, these hurdles. And a lot of times in the churches, amazingly, you're going through, somebody else is going through the same thing. Right. Someone's maybe even a little bit more challenging. And so that's just amazing because, your family went to this church and you were not able to get any kind of support, that you needed to help you process now what you have now learned. What about your grandfather? What kind of support did you get from him? Was he supportive?
He was not. He was a lot older than my grandmother. And even as a child, I could remember him saying that he didn't want my sisters in the house, but he didn't have a problem with me. I guess because they raised me, but I had blocked out some things in my memory. Well, I'm gonna say God didn't allow me to remember some things until 2015. I remembered, and some things started triggering. I started having dreams. And in the midst of those dreams, I thought it was another child that was getting abused, and I remembered it, but it was me. And when the memories start, I went to visit home because I still got relatives there. And every now and then, it's only an hour from Savannah. I'll take a trip home just to see the older relatives. And I went by the house that I grew up in, which I never would visit down that street. But this particular day,
just for memories, just wanted the memories of that. Okay, I want you to hold that thought right there, and let's take a commercial break. And after the commercial break, then we'll come back and pick up about your relationship, with your grandma and your grandfather, and how life has now taken this twist and this turn on this journey of domestic violence and sexual abuse. So to our listeners and our viewers, we ask that you stay tuned, stay there with us. We will get more into the story. As we stated, if you're in a domestic violence relationship, someone out there that needs the help, please do not hesitate. Get that help. Call that 1-800-799-7233. Stay tuned for more inspirational moments on A Place Called Through. I am your host, Patricia Wade Goings, and we'll be back momentarily right after this commercial break. Stay tuned.
Calling all HBCU alumni, supporters, and golfers. It's that time of year again. Yes, the HBCU Swing Into Their Dreams charity golf tournament on Tuesday, April 5th. If you missed the last one, you have time once again to be epic. Don't miss the golf tournament of the year, the Swing Into Their Dreams HBCU charity golf tournament at the Atlanta National Golf Club in Milton, Georgia, Tuesday, April the 5th. Registration begins now. Sign up your golf teams at swingintotheirdreams.com. That's swingintotheirdreams.com or call 770-686-7148. That's 770-686-7148. Don't miss it.
Welcome back to A Place Called Through, Inspirational Moments with Patricia Wade Goings, who is your host on A Place Called Through, and we broadcast from WYTV7, Community Broadcasters Network. You know, we were talking earlier with Miss Latonia Henry about domestic violence and sexual abuse. It is a national problem, but we want to take this minute out just to share with you just some information that we found from the National Domestic Violences Hotline. And it stated that and we're repeating this, that on a typical day, more than 20,000 phone calls related to domestic violence are received from these hotlines. It says on an average, nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner in the United States. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have experienced some form of physical violence by an intimate partner. 1 in 7 women and 1 in 25 men have been injured. 1 in 10 women have been raped by an intimate partner. The data, unfortunately, says that it is unavailable on male victims. 1 in 15 children are exposed to intimate partner violence per year, and 90% of these children are eyewitnesses to violence. We also found out that anyone can be a victim of domestic violence. There is no typical victim. Victims of domestic violence come in all forms. They come in every walk of life, varying from age groups, the backgrounds, community, educational levels, etc. Victims of domestic violence do not bring violence upon themselves. They do not always lack self-confidence, nor are they just as abusive as the abuser. So we just wanted to share those facts and some information about domestic violence, for you, so that you'll be aware. And perhaps if you're not in that relationship, and even if you are, you'll be able to know this is what's going on a national level. So Ms. Henry, we're talking about, your father. Unfortunately, your father was the abuser for your mother. Have you or your siblings ever witnessed him abusing your mother?
Like I said, my siblings did. Since I was so young, I don't have any memories of their relationship together or even of her. But my sisters did. They were old enough to tell me information about, and other family members as well, to help me understand some things that happened during their marriage, because they were married.
And so you've moved on and you're living with your grandparents now, and your grandfather seemed to be more distant, whereas your grandmother was the protection, the love, and she wrapped her arms around you, and she would do whatever was necessary to protect you all from any harm. So your relationship with your grandfather, it was not the lovingest, I would say, relationship that you had. As you said, you kind of felt at a point that you were singled out from your siblings in a relationship with him.
Yes. As I recalled, in 2015, he abused me, and sexually. I was molested as a child, and some things were done to me that were unspeakable. And I think God protected my memory, because as I got older, some things had happened to me in my life to where if I did had remembered my childhood, I probably would have committed suicide. I attempted twice, failed both times, but my life had taken such a downward spiral until if I had that memory, I would have been more destructive towards myself than I was not remembering.
And so your attempts for suicide were based on the fact that you've lost your mother and you witnessed, the domestic violence, of course, as people were sharing the different stories of the, the its and the ifs with you. And now your grandmother, we're understanding at this point from a previous conversation that your grandmother has passed. And so that kind of left you just there. And so you wanted to end this because of the fact now you have been sexually molested. You've witnessed nothing but domestic violence throughout, the years of your earlier life. And so now you're at a point, okay, I just want to give up. I quit.
Yes.
And so, by the grace of God, he did not allow that to happen, because he said, what? He has greater works for you to do. So therefore, you were able to rise up, above those circumstances and move on. And so because of the fact that you have moved on, and you're a survivor. You survived not only domestic violence and the sexual assault and the suicide attempts, but now comes the twist for you, where now you're an adult. You've got to fight even another battle. You have to know how to be the mother. You have to learn how to be the wife, but most importantly, you had to learn how to be you. So talk to us about how you went through that process of how life turned around for you.
It was a process, I will say, and it wasn't always, when we go through processes, sometimes it's not pretty. And I can't sit here and say that mine was. I used drugs, I drank. And the only thing that really saved me was I knew that if I was not here for my children, they would end up in the foster care system, because all three of my children had different fathers. I was a mother at 16, then again at 25, then again at 26. So my boys were 13 months apart. My daughter was who I had when I was 16 years old. Me and her father got into a relationship. He was 2 years older than me. And that was my first experience with domestic violence as a 16-year-old mother that had just had a baby, and I got knocked down a flight of stairs with my baby in my hands, and all I could do is cradle her to try to protect her, and I went tumbling down a flight of stairs. So that was my first encounter with domestic violence at 16, and that continued through our 4-year, 5-year relationship until I finally got the courage. I left and then I came back. And when I came back, it was worse. So that last time when he almost killed me, I finally ended it, and that was that. And during the course of that fight, I need him to get away from him and to get loose. And because of that, my daughter is an only child because he could not have any more children. And he's gone on now, he's passed on, but that was a source of contention with me, because he said I prevented him from having more children. And I said, well, you was trying to prevent me from living. So I did what I had to do to still be here and to still live. But from then on, it was almost self-destruction, to where I would do things to myself. I was not a happy person, and I didn't want people around me to be happy. And I was like that for some years. I married my first husband when I was 31. That also was a very abusive relationship. We were married for 3 years. And those 3 years, I call it the torture chamber, because I went through unspeakable things at the hands of that man in that house. And my children, especially my daughter, she was old enough to witness a lot of the things that happened in that house. But just like me, the same thing that happened to me with my memory being blocked, she didn't remember a lot of it because she's 37 now. And as we would talk, she was like, oh, Mama, I do remember that. So God even protect not only my memory of what I went through as a child, but he protected her memory of what I went through, and she witnessed a lot of it.
So I want to back up and go back to your grandmother too.
Okay.
Was she knowledgeable of this abuse that you were sustaining now from your grandfather?
I can remember her peeping, because he had a habit of wanting me to sit on his lap. And I love football today, but my experience with football came because I would sit on his lap and we would watch football. And he would do the things that he did to me when I was sitting on his lap. But I can remember her, I can see the living room, and I could see her peeping out the kitchen around the corner, seeing him do what he was doing to me, and she would just go back. I can remember them fighting. Well, it wasn't a fight, but they would have their domestic situations. So I grew up with them fighting and him bruising her. And I didn't understand that because my grandmother was 6'2", a good 350 pounds, and my grandfather was a little puny man, but she would never fight back. And I didn't understand that. Why couldn't she just hit him back? Why couldn't she fight for herself and defend herself? But she never would. So
And
yeah, she did see what was going on, and I think it was like a deference to, if he's bothering me, he's not bothering her. So she was aware of what was going on.
What was going on? Amazing. Yes. What was your relationship with your grandfather, as you grew older? And you were able to.
He passed when I was 11.
And did you, prior to his passing, was there any reconciliation there?
No, because to my remembrance, he did what he did to me until he got sick and could not anymore. He died with cancer, and he died horribly. He was cursing God on his deathbed. So he did not leave this world peaceful. The lady that he messed with, because he had extra women, she would come and sit by his bedside to help nurture him or whatever, get him water or whatever. But my grandmother would make me get him water. She would make me take his plate to him, and if he needed to be cleaned because he couldn't get up to go to the bathroom himself. And he would just be cursing. I mean, just the filthiest of curses. But she would take care of him, and she would make me take care of him.
And so then, from surviving all of this, you're happily married, you have a loving family now who loves you. So, we're winding down now, but I want you to tell our listeners and our viewers, this inspiration of how you survived and what they can do as a victim, and what survival really means.
Survival is that instinct that we all have, that you have to make it. There's no situation that we get in that is impossible. We all have an inner fight inside of us. And sometimes you have to pull on that. Sometimes it's stronger for some people, and sometimes it takes some people a little more. But all of us have it. If you're in a domestic situation, don't stay in there. I had to counsel somebody last week about, they're going through a divorce and her husband doesn't really think that she's serious. And I told her, when he realizes you're serious, you're going to be in danger. You have to get out now. You have to have an action plan now to get out of that house and get your children out, because you're safe, because he think that it's going to be like all the other times. And this is for anybody else that's listening. These perpetrators, because it's men that get abused as well, sometimes financially, sometimes physically. You have to be guarded of your life, because we only have one. Don't take a person's threat for granted. If somebody tell you, if I can't have you, nobody else will, take that for face value for what it is. They mean what they say. So make your life a priority. Trust God, pray, have a relationship with somebody else on the outside, so that if something happens, somebody will know what's going on with you. Don't keep everything to yourself. Don't let your children be reclusive and keep everything to themselves. Have somebody that knows the situation that you can trust, that if you have an issue and something does happen to you, then somebody can give an account of your situation and be your voice if you can't are unable to speak.
And that's really important. Get the help. Again, we want to repeat to, our listeners and our viewers, if you're in that kind of relationship or you know someone, please call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. And again, I want to thank you, Ms. Hendry, for being our guest today here on A Place Called Through with those inspirational moments. I am your host, Patricia Wade Goins. And hey, for our listeners and our viewers, if you want to share your story, please reach out to me at pgoings.wp@gmail.com. Also, I invite you to visit my website at www.willpowerthecalltoriseabove.org. Hey, also, I am the author of a book, Willpower, The Call to Rise Above, and that book is available to you at Barnes & Nobles, online, as well as Amazon. I am your health and your wellness and your life coach. So if you need prayer or you just want to hear a voice and have someone to talk to about your situation, please give me a call in area code of 843-608-9744. Again, we want to thank Ms. Hendry, who is also a minister. She is also a coach, and she also is the CEO, I believe, and the founder of the Sisterhood Chapter in Savannah, Georgia. Please reach out to her as well. You'll find her on Facebook. Again, we thank you for joining us today on A Place Called Through in those inspirational moments. It has been our pleasure. Blessings and love.